So welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Tuesday, July 6th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. And today we're going to go to Anchorage, Alaska and talk with Lori Townson from Alaskan Public Radio Network. So here is the interview for the day. Lori Townson, Alaska Public Radio Network in Anchorage, Alaska is reporting on many events this week. Amongst them has to do with a International Whaling Commission and discussions around quotas and how it impacts natives in Alaska. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Hi, Paul. Sure. The International Whaling Commission meetings wrapped up last week. They were in Monaco, and there's a lot of concern with the coastal people here, Native people here, regarding their quotas. There's been political maneuvering and polarization happening within the IWC, the International Whaling Commission, as more countries come on as member nations. And some of those countries are not whaling countries. Some of them aren't even located on coasts, but they're having impact on the decisions that are made about whaling. There was a move during this last meeting to extend the quotas for people who are doing subsistence whaling, such as the coastal people here in Alaska, for extending those quotas to 10-year blocks rather than 5-year blocks. That didn't get support and didn't pass, which was disappointing to the people up on the North Slope here, because of the fact that a lot of times their quotas are used as political leverage to try to get other things done, and they wanted to take that off the table. In 2002, they lost their quotas for a time. And
through the International Whaling Commission?
Yes, because of some political maneuvering that was going on. The U.S. chair had to work very hard to get those quotas back, reinstated. In 2007, there were attempts to block them again. And now their quotas are firm until 2012, but after that time, now they're back at the table again. And part of the problem is that there's people who are vehemently opposed to commercial harvests. Norway, Iceland, and Japan want to be able to whale commercially, right, do some commercial whaling now. And people want to separate those two issues because there's a lot of controversy around commercial whaling. There's some controversy around subsistence whaling with some of the nations also. Some nations don't want any whaling to be happening at all. So they're trying to get these two issues separate. There was an idea during this meeting to perhaps allow some commercial harvest instead of this moratorium that's been on it by the IWC so that they could better regulate it, but that went nowhere because of the opposition against it. So the subsistence whalers, the people in the northern part of Alaska who are coastal communities who have whaled since time immemorial, are upset that their quotas are being used as political leverage and would like to see that taken away.
They're not in jeopardy right now, right? I mean, they haven't lost them, so they're in place at least for what, the next couple of years?
Yes, until 2012, their quotas are in place.
Okay. Well, we'll keep in touch on that and see what happens. That's kind of an interest, and I know Japan and some of those countries dominate that commercial end of the whaling thing. Tell us a little bit about the Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, John Echohawk's visit to Alaska here recently.
Larry Echohawk.
Larry Echohawk, excuse me.
Yes. He was here in the state talking to tribes across the state about their concerns with numerous issues. Some of them are the lack of law enforcement in Native communities here in Alaska. It's a chronic problem in Alaska, and also issues the staggeringly high rates of suicide among young people in Native communities here. And another issue that's beginning to sort of rise to the surface is concern over shareholder status within the Alaska Native corporations. As you know, Alaska doesn't have reservation systems such as the lower 48. There's a corporation system here, and tribal members are shareholders. And there are some people who are saying now that as many as 60% of young Alaska Native people don't have shares in their corporations, and they're very concerned about what the future means because the corporations have the land base. And there's concern that corporate leadership could decide at some point in the future to sell the land if it were not profitable. And so there's concern about how to change that. That would, of course, take congressional intervention to change how those shareholders are added into the rolls.
What do we know about them now? Those shares were issued to members of tribes 40 years ago.
Yes.
Anyone who was born after 1971 did not receive shares, other than a few situations where corporations there have extended those benefits. Those shares can be passed down.
Yes, but there's different constructions within the corporations as to how that works, who you can give them to or who can inherit them, and what your voting status may be. You may be able to inherit some stock, but maybe you don't have voting status. And so there's different mandates within different corporations, and I think people are looking for a more standardized approach to membership. An example that was given when Mr. Echohawk was here traveling around is the fact that Don Young, our one congressman from Alaska, his wife, his late wife Lou, was Athabascan. They have 14 grandchildren that should have that have the blood ability to be shareholders, but are not shareholders in the corporation. So he's got 14 grandchildren who aren't corporation shareholders.
So they'll be looking at some legislation that might change what the corporations do, or it's going to have to go back to the membership of the corporations themselves.
I think it's going to take a lot of discussion, and tribal leaders are hoping for more cohesiveness among themselves and among the corporation leadership so that they can come together and figure out how to do this together. Because that's one of the things that Don Young said is, I can't take something to Congress unless you guys come to me and are unified about what you want to do here. Otherwise, I can't push for change. And so that's what they're looking at right now, is how to bring that message together.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back to you again. We're going to talk to you a little bit more about whaling in the future, and we'll keep an eye on whether there's development on this shareholder stock issue up there. It certainly operates much different than the reservation and the enrollment system on blood quantum here in the lower 48. Thanks for joining with us today, Lori. We appreciate your time. Where can people find these stories?
They can follow us on Twitter at APRN, or they can find us online at aprn.org.
Thanks for joining again.
Thanks, Paul.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you all for stopping in. Come back again soon. Miigwech.